Hi there, and welcome to our latest edition of Money Talks, where we take a look at all aspects of the rural economy as it affects you in the ag sector. In this edition, fallout from the South Canterbury finance failure, the pain, the payout, and the public purse, plus the price to be paid by the rural economy. A special fertilizer frontline report from the man at the top, all the global moves that could affect what you pay for what you put on your land. And how badly did PGG Wrightson do when it decided to set up that bungled dairy farm business in South America? All this and much, much more coming up. But first, the eyes of the world are closely watching the giant U.S. economy. Latest results for the U.S. GDP result for the second quarter have been revised down from 2.4 to 1.6%. What's that mean for the global economy? Let's go to ASB rural economist James Shortall. James, welcome back.
Good to be back.
You've been in Fiji on holiday. How's the economy doing over there?
Yeah, I can't really comment on the Fijian economy other than I was contributing to it and spending a bit of money, so...
Glad to hear it. But listen, going over to the U.S. now, real crisis of confidence. What's going on?
Yeah, the US, it's going backwards, I guess. Well, their economy's not going backwards, but some of their numbers are, and GDP's been revised down from 2.4 to 1.6%. Households are really feeling the pinch. I mean, consumer spending makes up 70% of the US economy, and unemployment's up at 9.6% at the moment. People are just not confident about their jobs, and of course, housing numbers are also pretty bleak. So there's a whole lot of things that are going on. Recently, some of the reports are indicating people are saving more. Of course, they want to do that when they're a little bit uncertain about their jobs. So if they're saving, then they're not going to be spending, and that's a bit of a problem for the US.
The housing market has fallen 27% year on year up to July. What does that tell you?
Yeah, well, I think the government really helped out the US housing market sort of through the past 12 months with some of their tax incentives, and that did give the housing market a boost, and they see that as very important to the US recovery. That did give them a boost out of it, but as soon as those tax incentives have come off, then that has really hampered the US housing market, and we're seeing those numbers come through now. And
the political system seems to be paralyzed. Midterm elections now just a couple of months away. What effect does that have on moving forward with the economy?
Well, I guess there's limited decision-making about what's going to happen, and of course there has been a bit of backlash with some of the bailouts of the large financial institutions from the Treasury and that sort of thing. So, with the US economy slowing down, then I guess if there's no decisions made on some of those bigger items, then that could have an impact on the economy.
But meantime, the central bankers are still getting together over coffee and donuts, I assume, talking about what they're going to do. Do you hear what they have up their sleeve?
Well, the US Fed, then they are saying that they're going to continue trying to help out the US economy as much as they can. They have already supported the economy a lot. Of course, the Fed funds rate, which is effectively the same as the official cash rate here in New Zealand, then that's at a range of 0 to 0.25%. So wow. You can't go any lower than that. They're buying bonds and treasuries and that sort of thing to try and keep interest rates down in the US. So they're doing a lot of work, but they're going to try and continue to do that because they have indicated that they are a little bit concerned about the US. Now let's bring it on home. How's the New Zealand dollar doing against the greenback? We've been falling against the US, and I think there's been a little bit of two things going on there. Equity markets have been coming back over the past few weeks, so of course when that does happen, then it reduces the appetite for risk for the New Zealand dollar and sort of the Australian dollar, the Canadian dollar, that sort of thing. So we have been reducing against the US because of some of those reasons, but also for some of the reasons here in New Zealand, of course.
South Canterbury finance took an immediate hit, went way down, but apparently now coming back up.
Yeah, well, yesterday we also had some other building consent data, which was a bit weaker. We had business confidence, which was also pretty subdued. So there were some economic factors for the New Zealand economy that I think contributed too. So. And the construction crisis, apparently 20,000 jobs at risk. What are you hearing about that? Well, construction, yeah. I mean, there's building consents out yesterday. It sort of gives a pretty good indication. Economists follow that to give a clear view on what's happening down the track and whether there is going to be some building work going on. And that has been, building consents has been pretty weak for quite a while now. So that gives us a bit of a feeling that there's not going to be a lot of activity in that sector, and there is going to be a bit of pain to go through yet. But good news in the export sector: dairy, logs, and pleasure boats way up. Where are we selling to? Yeah, pleasure boats I can't comment on. I'm not too
Come on,
familiar
you
with that.
got one and took you to Fiji. Tell the truth.
I mean, the dairy and forestry, that's that's been the trend over the past few months. Dairy, of course, the prices that we've seen over the past 12 months have been pretty strong, and that really does filter through in some of these export receipts about now. And forestry, of course, has also been pretty strong. Those prices have been coming down a little bit more just over the past few months for forestry products, but of course, exports are going pretty well for our agricultural sector at the moment.
And for dairy, up 32% in Asia, in China.
Yeah, well, China's the big driver for the dairy industry at the moment. A lot of the emerging economies are really driving dairy, of course. We've talked about that before, and I mean...
and we'll talk about it again.
And we have to, because that's really going to be the drivers for dairy down the track, and that's some of the key areas that are going to, put the money in our dairy farmers' pockets. Global dairy trade auction coming up tomorrow. What are you picking, James? Well, I'm hoping that there's going to be some stability, because we've seen a lot of movement over the past few months, and unfortunately in the wrong direction. I think in the past few weeks, and seen some numbers from New Zealand NZX AgriFacts, and that suggests that dairy prices have stabilised a little bit. So if prices do stabilise, then that's going to be a good thing. If we see some, we are picking probably not to see a whole lot of movement in the interim, because there's a whole lot of factors going on around the world in terms of the global economy, in terms of inventory rebuilding, in terms of production increases from some of the big dairy players. So, I'm not picking that there's going to be some big increases in dairy prices in the interim, but perhaps in a couple of months then we're going to see some more positive movements. OK, stand by. We'll come back to you. Thanks, James. Coming up after the break, what's the latest must-know information about fertiliser? We bring in one of New Zealand's leading experts who keeps his finger on the global fertiliser pulse. But first, a question for you in our Farmers' Facts and Figures quiz. In the year 2050, how many hungry people will the world have to feed? The answer right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Talks. Just before the break, we asked you, in the year 2050, how many hungry people will the world have to feed? The answer, more than 9.2 billion people. And to make that happen, fertilizer will clearly be king. Ravensdown is New Zealand's biggest supplier of fertilizer, supplying more than half of all the fertilizer used by farmers here. The chairman of Ravensdown, New Zealand, who's also a farmer, is Bill McLeod. He spends a lot of time traveling, keeping his finger on the pulse. Bill, welcome to the show. What's the latest?
Well, fertiliser prices look as though they're stabling internationally, Genevieve, but every time we make comments like that, something goes astray. So, but generally speaking, looking stable. OK, so good news for farmers coming up. Well, yes, the prices reduced quite a bit through this last year. And one example, just over a year ago, farmers were paying about $1,100 a tonne for urea. That's now selling for $620 a tonne. So there has been quite a reduction in prices. You won't see those reductions carrying on. It's stabilised, and if anything, my guess, it might move up slightly. James, we see that over in China, as they grow, so does their appetite for meat, for example. That means that we're going to need more global grain crops, doesn't it, for fertiliser? What do you think is going to happen? For fertiliser prices? Yes. I mean, I think we've got to be quite clear. Here in New Zealand, then we use grass-based systems. A lot of other places around the world use grain-fed systems for their meat. And meat, of course, it takes about 7 kilos of grain to produce 1 kilo of meat. So, that means there's got to be a lot of grain around the world, and more people want to eat dairy, they want to eat meat, those sorts of things. So there's going to be more appetite for fertiliser because, of course, China developing economies, and they want to eat these better type foods that New Zealand does produce, but other places also produce. So fertiliser prices, I think I would probably agree that if there's any movement, it's probably going to be upwards, and that's all about demand from overseas. And talk to me a little bit, Bill, about the worldwide reserves of phosphate. This is critical. Where are they at? Well, it's interesting because a few years ago there were people saying that it was critical, was going to run out. Now I can tell you that Morocco's at current usages has got around about 2,000 years of supply. That's just one country. Now, they probably are the main one. They've got the best quality for what we use for single superphosphate. But the reserves in China and South America, North Africa, right down the west coast, there's no worry about running out of the basic commodities.
And apparently there's new production capacity too for DAP, MAP and urea.
Exactly. The Ma'aden project in Saudi Arabia is coming on stream. I think early next year there's another 1 million tonne of DAP coming out of that plant, and over the next few years we're expecting another 5 to 6 billion tonnes. So, you know, you're talking some very, very big numbers here.
James, a couple of big takeover bids now, hostile takeover bids in the fertiliser world. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we've got BHP looking to the hostile takeover actually for potash in Canada, and that's significant. They're a big player in the fertiliser business, and sort of up around $40 billion US dollars. So a huge takeover, and I think it's probably give us an indication. Bill's mentioned that prices have probably stabilised, and this gives a bit of a, you know, the talk in the media in the US is that they're taking a bit of advantage as to what share markets are doing and what the share price is doing, and to try and take advantage to they see the growth in the business, so they want to be part of it.
Are we likely to see bidding wars, Bill?
Well, it's going to be an interesting one as it plays out, Genevieve, because Potash Corp and a couple of the other suppliers act as a cartel for potash in the world at the moment, and they hold prices up. They've done it very successfully. Now, what we don't know is if BHP go in there, whether they will have the ability to break that cartel. There's some suggestion that contractually they won't be able to, but it'll be interesting to see.
Now, 10 years ago, Ravensdown Fertiliser was simply selling fertiliser. You made a strategic decision, the company at that point, to diversify. How has that worked out for you?
Oh, we're very pleased with the moves we made, and you're quite correct. We were just selling fertiliser. We were selling it through merchants. We now sell direct to the farmers. We then moved into agricultural chemicals and animal health products. We then moved into purchasing lime quarries throughout New Zealand. We see that as a very, very important part of the farming business. And we've since moved into aerial and ground spread based on the need for proof of placement and good quality spreading.
You're currently involved too, a bit of a high court battle going on with your rival, Balance Agri-Nutrients. What's that all about?
Well, Lincoln University invented a product called Pt1, which is a nitrogen inhibitor. Now, the secret to it was that they, by fine grinding it and mixing it with liquid, sprayed it onto the pastures to cover the total ground. Now, the old method was, with the dry product, was just sprinkling on the pasture, and of course it wasn't getting because it works on the microorganisms, it wasn't reaching them all. So the patent is around the idea of fine grinding and spraying on rather than putting on dry.
And your rival says if you win the court battle to hold on to this technology, that in effect you're going to have a monopoly and have an unfair advantage. What do you say as a businessman?
Oh, for heaven's sake, we'll sell to anyone. And I guess
even your rival?
Oh, we'll sell to their customers, no problem at all. And you talk about monopolies, and particularly in cooperatives, and you look at Fonterra, processing, I suppose, 90–95% of milk in New Zealand very successfully. So I think that's a red herring.
Okay, everybody's talking, of course, about the terrible disaster with South Canterbury Finance. Let me ask you, James, what was your reaction when you heard they went into receivership?
I was surprised, I have to say, and of course from the reaction from the government to come in so quickly and announce their injection of funds. So I was really